Another wine fraud ring is broken up, making wine and a war zone, and want to learn how to make wine? A new series of articles will teach you how. All that and more on this episode of This Week Uncorked. Hello and welcome to episode 15 of This Week Uncorked for Monday, October 28th, 2024. I am Brett Martin from Cork and Journey, your number one source for Corkage fees, wine reviews, winery reviews, restaurant reviews, and more. With that, let's get right on into this week's wine news. So a wine fraud ring was broken up in Italy this year. They were making fake French wine, selling it for hundreds of thousands of dollars a bottle, tens of thousands of dollars a bottle. They found labels, they found bottles, they found everything. Evidently, the main guy was a Russian guy who had done this in the past. And 6 arrests were made, 1 super high value target, according to Interpol. 14 locations were searched from Torino and Milano, seizures of large amounts of bottles of wine, different counterfeit Grand Crus, stickers, wax products, ingredients to refill wine, to recap bottles. It was all discovered. Anyway, they had $1.4 million in value just for the equipment alone, not even talking about the wine. But this keeps happening. Reminded me of a great book. If you've never read it, I highly recommend checking out The Billionaire's Vinegar. This is a book about a guy named Harry Rodenstock, and he was a big deal. And he seemed to have this amazing ability to find the craziest wine that no one could ever find. And he would do all of these blind tastings, and he fooled broadband. He just fooled all kinds of people. His big one was the Thomas Jefferson bottle. And he always found his wines. It was like someone's basements, and there was an estate sale, and he found all these great wines. Anyway, he fooled a lot of people in the wine world for a very, very long time. And it's a great book, highly, highly worth the read. So check that out. And if you're in the market, if you can afford those $5,000, $10,000 bottles of wine, you might want to have somebody check it out before you buy it, just to make sure you got the real thing. All right, and moving on, Wine Enthusiast names Jean-Charles Boisset their Person of the Year for 2024 for their Wine Star Awards. If you're not familiar, Boisset Holdings is ridiculous. They just have so many brands. Deloche in the Russian River Valley, Buena Vista in Sonoma, and dozens of others. I put a link in the show notes. They're basically in Napa. That's where they basically have set themselves up and been doing a bunch of great things in the wine world. So shout out to Jean-Charles. So nice job there, sir. And with that, quick plug for Rex Pickett, rexpickettbooks.com. He is the author of Sideways. You've probably seen the movie. It's the 20th anniversary of that movie. He's got his books for sale at rexpickettbooks.com, and he will sign them for you. He will autograph them for you. Write whatever you want for him to in there. He's got posters. He's got other things. Anyway, if you use the code CORK10, you will get 10% off your entire purchase over at rexpickettbooks.com. We just spent the weekend with Rex. It was the 20th anniversary of Sideways, put on by Rex at Alisal Ranch up in San Ynez Valley, just outside Solvang, maybe 10, 15 minutes outside Solvang, if that. I had an absolute great time. We had a dinner with a bunch of Sideways fans. Had a writer there from Esquire magazine who's going to be writing a piece about it as well. Did some nice horseback riding, and then we kind of did a little Sideways bus tour. Went to a few of the wineries that were featured in the movie. Anyways, great time, and a shout out to Rex and everybody else who put the Rex and Joy who put that entire thing on. It was a good time had by everybody there. And moving on with the news, we've talked about this before. A Lebanon producer harvests grapes despite bombings is the headline from the drinks business. The producer is IXSIR. He says his 2024 vintage will be a different style compared to 2023, more expressive and showing great promise. As of this writing, the wine regions in Lebanon have been unaffected by the conflict that is going on there. But this is a crazy thing. Winemakers, their job is hard enough. They're farmers. They have to have a perfect crop. They have to deal with the weather. They have to harvest. They have to make wine. Then you throw war on top of that, and it's absolutely crazy. We talked about this back on episode 12 when we were talking about The Cup of Salvation, which is a great movie by Som TV. Jason Wise is the director and producer on that. And it is a movie about making wine in Armenia when a war breaks out, actually in the vineyards. So that was a little more difficult for them. And then also, them smuggling grapes in from Iran for this bottle of Molina I've got over my shoulder here as well. And there's, by the way, a great book as well here, Wine and War, which talks about everything that went on during World War II. You can only imagine the French were invaded, the vineyards were overrun, their stockpiles were looted. Anyway, winemakers keep making wine. So shout out to this producer in Lebanon who is keeping it, Gabriel Rivero, just keeping it going. So good for you, sir. And wrapping up the news on a really cool thing. If you've never heard of James Suckling, he used to be a wine critic for the Wine Spectator. Then he went off on his own and started jamessuckling.com. He's one of the top wine critics in the world. And on his website, he has, outside the paywall, anyone can read it, he's got a blog and it's Brain on Winemaking. And it's Matt Brain, who is a winemaker. You might have known he worked with Alpha Omega at one time, might still be. But it's an entire series of articles on everything that goes into making wine. From when do you pick, what the brix levels are, punch it, you name it. There's this whole series that he's releasing on what goes into making a great bottle of wine, and just stumbled across it. I thought it was great, so I thought I would share it with you as well. So that's over at jamessuckling.com. Brain on Winemaking, search for that. We actually put a link where I kind of did a search and it brings up all the articles. They don't have them very well organized, but if you search for that, you can bring up all of his articles on that. And with that, let's move on to our wine and winery of the week. It seems I've been talking a lot about Rex Pickett lately, and how does Calais Winery, which is what we're going to talk about, tie into that? Well, Calais Winery is a little winery in Texas that Tina and I stumbled upon when we were doing our little-known wine regions of the Southwest, when we went through Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And Calais, it literally is a little tasting room kind of buried under a bunker, like under some dirt. And this is a French winemaker from Calais whose last name happens to be Calais. What do you think about that? And he has doing some really amazing things with Texas fruit, which is just, it's crazy. I've got a bottle of his Rousseau, which is a Merlot, 100% Merlot that he did. And Tina and I gave it third place in our blind tasting of Merlots. Rex gave it second place. Outstanding. And the first place was a 2011 Bordeaux that was just ridiculous, Gabby. So I almost should have left that one out. But ranked up there really, really well. If you're in Texas, it's just outside Fredericksburg, kind of on the little wine trail that they've got there. Hard to find, though. So you'll want to put Calais in. You'll want to map it. They don't have big signs. They don't have a big fancy tasting room. Looks like a couple of sheds. Their tasting room, like I said, is actually kind of underground. Very small. But man, are they making some really good wine. So worth checking that out if you can. And, since I'm talking about these little known regions that we went to, I want to highlight for the wine of the week, Flying Leap Vineyards 2021 Trio White Blend. Never had a blend like this. It's Malvasia Bianca, 50%, Grenache Blanc, 40%, and Picpoul, 10%. And it is crazy good. So, if you're in Arizona and you're checking out some tasting rooms, check out Flying Leap Vineyards, and you can't go wrong. This was really, really an interesting wine. It's a dynamic winery. It was founded by former Air Force pilots, and they're just, making some waves with the grapes and what they're doing. They get their fruit from Wilcox Vineyard. So we've talked about this before, but all of those states, basically there's a mountain range that runs from the south of Arizona through the south of New Mexico through the north of Texas. And that is where all of this fruit is growing as well. But they're also doing some stuff, getting the grapes from Argentina, getting the grapes from Washington. So they're not just limited to Well, it's not necessarily the greatest fruit in the world, the Arizona fruit down at Wilcox, but you can make some good wines out of it. But they did a nice job. So it's always good to see winemakers trying completely different stuff. I mean, this is just explodes on the palate. Really, really worth it. It's got citrus and melon. Just a great summertime drink. Summer's over, but if you can find it, be perfect for next summer or with any kind of seafood whatsoever, especially like an oyster. But great wine, must try. So glad to give them a shout out. And with that, let's move on to our restaurant of the week and our Corkage fee. So I was on a business trip to Austin, Texas, nothing to do with wine, isn't that crazy? And stumbled across the Garrison restaurant. It's in the Fairmont Hotel in downtown Austin, a super, super nice spot. It's a really bit of a hidden gem. I'm really shocked it wasn't even busier, but just incredible quality service, great wine list, well worth the visit all the way around. The food was amazing. Like I said, the service was amazing. Ambiance was great. It's just a great little spot because, you're walking around Austin, kind of hard to find maybe a nice, quiet restaurant where you can just go have a really lovely dinner. Prices were relatively reasonable across the board as well. So that was a win-win. Anyway, great restaurant. If you're in Austin, Texas, stop by the Garrison. In Texas, we've talked about Corkage fees before. So New Mexico, they're not allowed. You can't bring any outside alcohol into a restaurant at all. They can't charge a Corkage fee because you're not allowed to bring it in. Texas seems to be a bit of a hodgepodge where half the restaurants say, no, it's illegal. And then half the restaurants say, sure, we have a Corkage fee, bring your own wine in. This one, maybe because it's in a big corporate hotel, is saying, no, sorry, no Corkage allowed. You can't bring in your own bottle of wine. So anyway, remember that if you're ever in Texas. So anyway, with that, we're going to wrap up this week's show. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we would love it if you would follow us on our YouTube channel over at Cork and Journey, and also social media apps, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. Follow us there. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us. Cheers. We'll see you next week.